protesters flung from a federal agent's car. We're diving deeper into the clashes between ICE agents that appear to be escalating on Bay Area streets.
These illegal actions are happening in a very Gestapo-style way.
We hear from an activist who says they're going to use ICE tactics on ICE, and a former federal agent who says someone's going to get hurt.
I think that's where we've seen some of this go south.
Plus, what the law says about how far protesters can go.
You cannot get in the way of them doing it if they're proceeding legally in their duties.
This is CBS News Bay Area with Juliette Goodrich.
Good evening. Things are getting tense as ICE ramps up deportations around the Bay Area. So we've spent the last several weeks compiling video of protesters and ICE agents squaring off. It started off with words, but increasingly things are getting physical. So case in point, pushing and shoving outside an immigration court in San Francisco. It led to this, protesters clinging to the hood of an ICE van as it sped away. And it's not the first time we've seen things turn ugly on Bay Area streets. From the streets of San Francisco to Concord, protesters are getting more confrontational as ICE agents are carrying out an unprecedented immigration crackdown. So our Max Darrow has been looking into all of this. And Max, I know that you talked with one activist who explains their tactics.
A little bit, Jules. Yeah, there are a lot of layers to this situation as a whole. And when it comes to the escalating scenarios between both ICE and the protesters, legal experts looking outside, from the outside looking in, say there is a very fine line.
Stop!
With tensions high for several weeks, we've been documenting encounters between ICE agents and protesters outside of Bay Area immigration courthouses as the federal agents take immigrants into custody. The first on June 10th, outside of an immigration court in Concord. Protesters confronted plainclothed ICE agents as they brought a man into custody. The woman in the pink hat tries to block the agents from getting through. Federal agents pushed protesters aside to clear a path to their vehicle. After the vehicle drove away, scuffles between protesters and federal agents continued for several minutes, with one protester slapping a federal agent. On June 24th in the financial district in San Francisco, protesters confront federal agents once again. It begins tense but peaceful with a lot of yelling. But moments later, protesters try to block federal vehicles. Federal agents physically move them out of the way to get their car through, and more struggles ensue in the moments after. On June 26th, a similar scene breaks out once again, but this one escalates further. A few protesters begin to climb onto a federal vehicle as it tries to drive away. The car starts to speed up, and the protesters decide to get off. And on July 8th, this video, captured from a neighbor's window in San Francisco. First, a scuffle at the front door of the courthouse, and then a large group of protesters tried to stop a federal vehicle from driving away by climbing on the hood of the vehicle. A few of them held on, despite the driver accelerating down Montgomery Street, appearing to swerve to get them off the vehicle.
It took a man, probably like 30s, early 40s, and shoved him into a car while they were beating everyone back with their batons. Everyone kind of got in front of the car, and ICE tried to run over everyone.
ICE, however, says that's not how it happened, telling CBS News Bay Area, on July 8th, protesters violently attacked and obstructed federal ICE officers who were simply doing their job by enforcing our nation's laws. But protesters say ICE shouldn't be carrying out these operations in the first place.
These illegal actions are happening in a very Gestapo-style way. So
I spoke with an activist who goes by HR.
We're hoping, honestly, to document and hope that that documentation can go towards creating cases that support them in the future, because a lot of what's happening right now shouldn't be happening.
Another objective.
The goal is to prevent abductions.
We asked about the clashes turning physical. HR points towards law enforcement.
Which is almost, always at the hands of, law enforcement or ICE.
We also sought out perspective from law enforcement. Former federal agent Jeff Harp points towards protesters crossing a line first.
They can't interfere with a lawful action. And I think that's where we've seen some of this go south. People are putting themselves in harm's way. There is no need to do that.
Attorney Shannon Dugan says protesters have every right to be there, but they can't obstruct the operation.
You can protest what the federal officers are doing or what the ICE officers are doing, but you cannot get in the way of them doing it if they're proceeding legally in their duties.
And by the letter of the law, she says there's a difference between engaging in protest and civil disobedience.
If you're sitting in front of a van carrying somebody who's undocumented that the federal government has lawfully picked up, then you are impeding the duties of a federal officer and you can be charged in federal court.
HR insists what has unfolded has been peaceful protesting, and the federal agents are the ones escalating the situations.
I mean, the hope is that through peacefully protesting, we won't get hurt, but that's still happening. So.
They do not advocate for violence against federal agents. However,
I think the same tactics that ICE and police use should be used against them.
then what does that mean?
It could mean whatever they're doing at the protest. If they're kettling protesters, then police too should get kettled.
Kettling refers to a law enforcement crowd control tactic to corral demonstrators within a limited area.
You can yell, you can scream, you can call somebody a name. First Amendment right is speech, not physical altercation.
The last sliver of whatever is left of humanity is what we're trying to protect. We don't want people to get hurt. We don't want them to be ripped from their families. We don't want to see our neighbors being taken to deportation centers that are well past their max capacity in cramped rooms.
Juliet, one thing HR wanted to make clear is that even though these are loud events that people see and they get picked up on social media and things like that, HR says there are a lot of efforts to help immigrants right now that are happening behind the scenes by a lot of these activists that you don't see unfolding like this. So this, again, so many layers to this situation.
Yeah, and you made a fine point when you said it is a fine line. So did you get a sense of what's next? Will there be more demonstrations?
It seems like there likely will be more demonstrations outside of immigration courthouses here in the Bay Area. There seemed to be an appetite for that from people in the community, at least according to HR in our conversation. So we'll keep our eyes peeled and see how these continue to unfold.
Yeah, I appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much, Max. All right, so we've seen the tensions between protesters and federal agents play out across the country, and sometimes with deadly results. On Monday, a man was killed by Border Patrol agents after he opened fire on a Border Patrol building in Texas. The McAllen police chief says the man shot dozens of rounds at the building. 2 officers and 1 Border Patrol employee were hurt. Days before, a police officer was shot in the neck outside a detention center in Alvarado, Texas. It started when a group of activists fired fireworks at the building. The gunfire followed when officers stepped outside to investigate. 10 people are now charged in the attack. President Trump has called for stiff penalties.
Very, very stiff. Very stiff. A long time in jail, a long time.
So regardless of political party, nearly everyone seems to be worried about the prospect of political violence in the U.S. In fact, a recent NPR and PBS News poll found that nearly 3/4 of Americans, 73%, think politically motivated violence is a major problem, and only 4% said it's not a problem at all. So to sort this all out and get through to and get more answers, we want to bring in Dr. Garen Winnamute, an emergency room doctor at UC Davis Health and director of the UC Davis Violence Prevention Research Program. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get right to it. We've got clashes at courthouses, the U.S. military in the streets of L.A., and now these shootings in Texas. What is your sense of where we are headed?
Thanks for having me. Potentially a very dangerous time lies ahead. Let me pick up from the NPR polling. Most people think political violence is potentially a big problem. It's also the case, we've been doing national survey research for 4 years now, that most people completely reject political violence as a way to solve the nation's problem, about 75% now. And of those who think political violence might be justified, the vast majority say, but I wouldn't want to get involved in it myself. So what we're seeing is a clash between extremes. And I want to refocus attention just for a second. We need to think a little bit about who the enforcement agents are. They're hiding behind masks. They often don't have agency identifiers. One possibility is that this new cadre of enforcement officers are in fact members of right-wing militia groups and the Proud Boys, who responded to an effort to recruit many more agents to staff out a deportation program. And in our survey research, no subset of the population is as violence prone as are members of the militia movement and organizations like the Proud Boys.
Let's talk about where things are right now with video, cell phone video. We see these images everywhere now. So can these images be used by both sides to bolster their arguments? How does it build hostility?
So it builds hostility by pitting one extreme against another and not telling the story of the vast majority of us in the middle who reject political violence or are unwilling to engage in it. We need to create space in our public discourse for the simple fact that Americans overwhelmingly reject violence. Some of us don't, fair enough. The majority of us can move ahead in ways that will prevent violence now and in the future.
Is there anything that could mitigate the high level of tension right now?
Yes, I can think of 3 things right off the top out of our survey research. I won't go into the detail, but number 1, people who reject violence need to talk to their family and friends, particularly family members and friends who might be thinking about violence, with the expectation that they can talk them out of it, because that's what we're learning in our surveys. People committed to violence say, but my family could talk me out of it. Number 2, any one of us could be that person who overhears a snippet of talk or sees something on the social media suggesting that violence is imminent. In that case, we need to contact somebody. And finally, a message to the extremists on both sides: we need not to oppose violence with more violence. The model here is not the riots of the 1960s, it's the civil rights movement. People who remain nonviolent occupy the moral high ground and mobilize others to join them.
Good points. It goes back to communication, and if you see something, say something.
Yes.
Dr. Garen Winnamute, I want to thank you for your time. You had excellent points here. We'll circle back with you another time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.